Well, good morning to you all. It's lovely to be here again. Jan was reminding me on the way here that we've been making this trek to Cartwright for more than 20 years. So it's good to be amongst friends. Nice to be here. And I understand you've been journeying through the book of Matthew, and we're going to journey through somewhat chapter 24 this morning. Now, if you've been on a long journey, maybe on a hike, you might be going along trails that are easily defined, but I think we've come to that journey in Matthew where we've come to the river, and the river is flooded, and we're about to take that step into the deep waters. And the further we go into those deep waters, the water rises and rises and rises, and it gets almost to our mouths. And I think chapter 24 is a bit like that. It's a chapter that has difficulty. And so I'm going to skim across that water on a boat. I'm going to try and avoid the deep water. So with that in mind, we're going to start at verse 36. Matthew 24, verse 36. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch. He would not have left his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour when he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So the reason I'm starting at verse 36 in Matthew chapter 24 is because the first part of Matthew 24 is a highly debated passage amongst theologians. Highly respected evangelical theologians debate the meaning of these verses. And there's a wide range of views. I'm just going to take a few minutes just to canvass those views, and we'll see where we get to. So at one end of the spectrum of these views, people interpret this first part of the chapter, which we haven't read, but you'll just have to take my word for it. They interpret these verses virtually as all applying to the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in 70 AD, and at that particular time the temple was totally destroyed by the Roman armies. And so they would say that this passage applies entirely to that period of time in history and is now past. And so we don't need to pay too much attention to those verses. So this view emphasises a couple of things. It emphasises the fact that Jesus pronounced judgment on Jerusalem and on the religious leaders. Just in the previous chapter, he said, from verse 37, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So they would say that Jesus is predicting here judgment upon Jerusalem because they had rejected God's Messiah when he came. And so they would say that was accomplished. God used the Roman armies to judge Jerusalem and to totally destroy it in 70 AD. The other part they emphasise is that verse in verse 34, which described events, who said these events will occur within the generation of those people that Jesus is talking to. I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. So they take that verse very seriously, and so they say if that's going to happen, then all the verses preceding that must have happened within that generation. So that's one end of the spectrum of how people interpret those verses. At the other end of the spectrum are people who say that virtually all those verses apply to a future time. All those verses apply to a future time when Israel and the temple in Jerusalem will be restored. This view emphasises the fact that the language in this particular passage seems to be describing events in a more dramatic fashion than what was experienced at the destruction of Jerusalem. So, for example, in verse 29, it says, immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. So that language seems to be expressing an event which is greater than could be explained by what happened in 70 AD to the city of Jerusalem. And so they would say it's pointing to a future time when these events will happen. And then between those two views, there's a whole other raft of views that sort of weave the idea of the historical idea of the destruction of Jerusalem in with the forecast judgment coming at the end time. And so these views would say that the destruction of Jerusalem occurred, was predicted by Jesus, but that's a foretaste of the much greater judgment that will be coming when Jesus returns again at the end times. So you might think, well, where do I stand on these particular views? In fact, where do you stand in these particular views? Well, my stand is I see the strengths and I see the weaknesses in all of these views. Some of them have stronger arguments and some of them have weaker arguments. Depends on where you put your emphasis, on where you want to go. And so I hold the particular details around the verses in chapter 24 quite lightly. I'm happy to say that I understand the strengths of some views, but I can also see the weaknesses in some of the arguments. And so I hold those views lightly, being prepared to be persuaded one way or another on it. So I don't intend to enter into that debate this morning. I'll leave that for you to explore at your leisure. I don't even have the time. When I've listened to sermons about this, people take weekends to talk about these particular issues. So I think there's enough for us to take away this morning from the passages that we've read this morning. And I think it's fair to say that all sides, all views around Matthew 24, they agree that these particular verses are talking about when Jesus' second coming occurs and what we should do as a result. So we're going to look at the passage that we read this morning, and we're going to see what we can learn about Jesus' second coming. I'm going to have two major points that we're going to deal with. Firstly, what can we expect? What can we expect when Jesus comes back again? And secondly, how can we be ready? How can we be ready? So firstly, what can we expect? Well, Jesus tells us that his return will be like a thief in the night and that we should keep watch because we don't know when that time will be. There will be no warning to us. Things will be going on in your life just as they always have. He says there, in the days of Noah, they were marrying and giving in marriage. They were going to parties. They were feasting. They were doing all the everyday things as part of their life until the flood came. And by that time, Noah and his family were shut up in the ark, and it was too late. He says, so will it be at the coming of the Lord. There will be no warning when it comes, and when it does happen, it will be too late. The delay has always been unusually long. Long enough that some will begin to doubt that it will ever happen. We've been waiting almost 2,000 years now for the promise of the second coming of the Lord. And people begin to doubt that, well, maybe the Lord got it wrong. Maybe things have moved on so far that he won't in fact return. And so they begin to doubt the words of the prophecy that he would be coming again, and they begin to live lives that please themselves. They begin to spend their time on building wealth, seeking self-advancement, seeking to enjoy the pleasures of life, because that's what their focus is on. They live lives as if there is going to be no accountability towards God. So this is what Jesus is talking about when he's talking about the wicked servant. In 48 to 49, but suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time, and he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. If ever there was a society that typified this particular view, surely it's our society today. One of the most popular songs, I'm led to believe, that is played at funerals today is the song by Frank Sinatra, I Did It My Way. The number one priority for people today is look after yourself. Take care of yourself. Your happiness is what's most important. And it's so easy for us to be lulled into that way of living and not be watchful, not be waiting for the coming of the Lord. But our life is not our own. Our life could end at any moment, whether it could be through our death or whether it's through the Lord's coming again. So we need to be watchful, is what Jesus is saying. Don't be lulled by what this world has to offer. Don't be lulled into thinking there's nothing further to come. The Lord will come, and he will expect us to be accountable to him. So when he comes, what can we expect? Well, I think there's two points that we can think about. What will it be like? What can we expect when the Lord comes again? Well, the first thing is he will come in glory. And the second point is he will come in power. So firstly, when Jesus returns, he will come in glory. So in Matthew 24, 45 to 47, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. What does that mean? What does it mean to be put in charge of all of the master's possessions? Well, the staggering thought here for us is that, all that belongs to Christ will become ours. Just let that sink in for a minute. Everything that belongs to Christ will become ours. He will unleash a life that enjoys the unimaginable blessings of God, unhindered by sin. It will be a life where we live in the very presence of the Creator God who loves us unconditionally, and he will love us with all his being. So that's what it means for us to be put in charge of his possessions. We will own all that belongs to Christ and that he has achieved for us. We will live in the presence of God, and all that means, in the presence of our Creator. So that's the first point. He will come in glory and we will inherit that particular glory. Secondly, he will come in power. So the second part is the master of that wicked servant will come on a day when he does not expect him and in an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's not something we like to think about, is it? There are people we work with, there are people in our families who are under this particular judgment. When Christ comes again, and Jesus comes again, he will have the full power and authority of his Father. He has been given that power by his Father. And he will come to this world to bring ultimate justice to the whole world. All the wrongs that have been made will be put right. All the injustices that have incurred in our world will be judged rightly. There will be an accounting to him for how we have lived our lives. He will come to judge those who have turned away from him. So what can we expect when the Lord comes again? Well, we can expect Jesus will return to share all his glory with those who remain faithful to their Lord. But Jesus will also return to bring judgment on those who go after the pleasures this life has to offer at the expense of others. So be warned. So we've thought about what is it we can expect when the Lord comes? Well, how can we be ready? He's coming in glory. He's coming in power and judgment. How is it that we can be ready for that? Well, I was reading about dolphins, of all things, in the preparation for my sermon. And I don't know whether you know, but my grandson Noah is very keen on these sorts of things. And I'm sure he'd be able to tell me that dolphins don't go to sleep. I don't know whether you knew that. Same true of whales. Dolphins, because they are mammals, they need to come to the surface in order to breathe. And so if they were to go to sleep underwater, they would just die because they, unlike us, don't have an automatic breathing reflex. They have to consciously come to the surface and breathe in order to stay alive. So what they do is their left side of their brain goes to sleep and their right eye stays open. And they sleep, half their brain goes to sleep. And then they swap over and their right side of their brain goes to sleep and their left eye stays open. And in that way, they consciously know when it's time to rise to the surface in order to breathe. I don't know whether you knew about that. Amazing. In the words of the experts, dolphins have to actively decide when to breathe. They alternate which half of the brain is sleeping periodically so they can get the rest they need without ever losing consciousness. If a dolphin were ever go into a deep, full brain, total unconscious sleep, they would simply suffocate or drown. Well, why do I tell you about dolphins? It's true of whales too, by the way. So why do I tell you about those? Well, I think it's a great example of what it means to be ready for the coming of the Lord. There's this idea that we should always have one eye looking for the coming of the Lord in this life. The other eye, of course, is going to be busy with the everyday aspects of life. We can't get away from those things. We have to care for our families and we have to go to work, we have to earn money, we have to live in our society. So one eye is focused on the day-to-day activities, but it should never be fully focused on that. One eye should always be open, looking for the coming of the Lord. So how should we wait? Well, I've got 3 points. 3 points of how we should wait. We should wait expectantly, we should wait patiently, and we should wait obediently. So the first one, we should wait expectantly. So the parable of the thief that Jesus tells us in this passage tells us that the Lord's return will be sudden and without warning. But the parable of the wise and wicked servant teaches us that we can expect a long delay. As I said, it's already been almost 2,000 years. That's quite a significant delay. If we are wise, we won't be distracted by such a prolonged delay. Jesus expected the delay to be long when he told that parable. But we live our lives with the sure and certain knowledge that the Lord will return, and he will return to bring both blessing and judgment. If when he returns we are found to be faithful servants, then we will enter into a heavenly inheritance that will last forever. There's nothing that can rob us of, that can rob us of that inheritance. It's been obtained through the death and resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, and it is guaranteed in heaven, held for us. So what is that inheritance? What's the inheritance that we're waiting for? Well, in 1 Peter it tells us, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you." And in Colossians 3, "Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, for you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory." Our anticipation of eternal things will give us a perspective on life that should transform us. It's a life that awaits us to be held us by Christ in God. And it is held for us under the authority of God. And it is nothing less than the glory of Christ. Jesus' resurrection glory will become our glory. There is nothing that can compare with what awaits us at the Lord's return. All that belongs to Jesus will be ours to enjoy for eternity. So when we're tempted to go after the things that this broken world has to offer, what do? Well, we lift our eyes up to Jesus. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father, and he has in trust a glory, our inheritance, waiting for us. So despite a prolonged wait, anticipating the Lord's return keeps us focused on the eternal blessings rather than the earthly distractions. So we wait expectantly. We expect the glory of Christ to come at his coming. So we wait expectantly. What do? Second time, we wait patiently. So the poor old servant who was having to work in the kitchen, feeding all the servants who were working on the master's farm, he must have been waiting for that master to come for a long time. It's hot in the kitchen. It's hard work providing for everybody. And we live in a broken world where sin and evil are all pervasive in the way we live. If we live long enough, we will experience hardship and difficulties. Whether it's illness, whether it's relationship breakdowns, financial hardships, the loss of a loved one. Life's hardships will impact us all at some point. And it may be that we experience persecution for our faith or be taken advantage of by unscrupulous people. But things will come into our life which cause us trials and hardships. It's during such times that we wait on the Lord patiently, knowing that our patience produces a Christ-like character that looks forward to the glory of God. So James tells us, consider it pure joy Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If we persevere in trusting God through the hardships in our lives, then our character is made more complete and mature, and it fits us for heaven. So we wait patiently. Paul tells us that when we share in sufferings just as Jesus did, we are made ready for sharing his glory. This is a staggering thought, that God uses the sufferings in our life to share his glory with us. In Romans 8, now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. I consider that the present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it in hope, that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. Jesus experienced the greatest suffering of all when he went to the cross, and that entitled him to the greatest glory of all. When God exalted him, he sits now at the Father's right hand, and the Father has given him all power and authority over us and over creation. And the staggering promise that Paul writes about here is that the children of God, believers, will share in his glory when all of creation is liberated from the effects of sin, and the hardships we experience today will lead to our glory, which in turn leads to the freeing of creation. Paul is saying when we experience difficulties in our life, it is pointing us to the time when all of creation will be liberated from sin, and we will share with creation in the glory of God. I don't know, it's hard to understand how that works together, but God promises that our suffering, our hardships will lead to his glory. So enduring life's trials with faith, it develops our character and it prepares us for sharing in Christ's glory. So we wait expectantly, we wait patiently during the hardships of life, and lastly, we wait obediently. So Jesus tells his disciples that he came to be a servant to all of humanity by the giving of his life. In Mark 10, he says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Consequently, if our master was a servant, we are also to be servants. We are to serve because we have been served by the Lord of glory. In the giving of his life on the cross, Jesus demonstrated that he was indeed the slave to us all. He served us all. We ready ourselves for Jesus' return by investing our lives in the care of others, especially those who are in need. In John 13, loving one another is the clinching evidence of what it means to be a true disciple of Jesus. He says, "A new command I give to you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Jesus is saying here, the test of true discipleship, the test that the world is entitled to make upon us, is how do we love one another? By loving one another, we show to the world God's love. By demonstrating God's love, we seek to bring others into the kingdom, and we've heard a bit about that this morning. We want them to avoid that judgment that comes when Jesus returns in power. We want them to experience the the glory of God for all eternity, as we look forward to. So by reflecting Jesus' servant-hearted example, we serve others and we demonstrate God's love. And that's the hallmark of a true disciple. So, what are we to expect? We expect Jesus is going to come in glory and he's going to come in power. How are we to be ready? Well, we're to wait expectantly. We're to wait patiently, and we're to wait obediently. You would have heard on the news just recently about Dr. Michael Mosley, who was holidaying in the island, one of the islands of Greece. He died while he was holidaying there at the age of 67. He was walking back from a day at the beach, back to their holiday accommodation, when it appears like he took a wrong turn. Well, he was 67, taking a wrong turn's easy at that age. He became lost, and he apparently just died of exhaustion. Couldn't make it. He was within metres of help and was unable to get back. Well, he was, you may or may not know, he had a famous television program called Trust Me, I'm a Doctor. And he was influential in the many books that he wrote about dieting. In fact, he was an influence on me because many years ago I took up the 5-2 diet in order to live a healthier life. And so he influenced me. But the tragedy of Dr. Michael Mosley's death is that it reminds us that life is fragile and it's fleeting. In the space of a few hours, his life was unexpectedly brought to an end. The same could happen to us at any moment. It can either come as a result of our death, or it can come as a result of the Lord's coming again. Our passage reminds us that life as we know it, it's coming to a climax when we will meet the Lord Jesus Christ, and it urges us to be ready for that event.